The prime minister actually ruled. He was not ordered around by a king. The parliament actually governed. And here's where Turkey and Iran split. And this is the explanation why Turkey has become so much more successful than Iran. After the 1950s in Turkey, despite, as I said, some setbacks, Turkey became increasingly democratic. Elections were held regularly, and most social conflicts were channeled into the political realm. So if you had a grievance, it could be resolved through institutions. You didn't have a dictatorial state as the kind that emerged in much of the rest of the Middle East. In Iran, however, the progress toward democracy, which was considerable in the late 40s and early 50s, was abruptly halted in 1953 when a coup organized by the CIA in collaboration with the British overthrew the democratic government of Iran and sent Iran into the downward spiral that has produced the current crisis. Why did that happen? Why was Iran pushed off the democratic track while Turkey remained on it? It happened because of one thing. One of those two countries was cursed. It was cursed by having lots of oil. Sometimes you read this phrase that countries are blessed with resources. That's rare. Countries are often cursed with resources. Turkey doesn't have any oil, so it didn't have so many vultures trying to rip it apart. Iran had huge amounts of oil, and its institutions were not strong enough to withstand intervention in the 1950s. Nonetheless, despite the fact that Iran has not developed a democratic government form, the ideas of democracy have become very deeply ingrained in the Iranian people. And although the crackdown after this recent election was quite shocking in its brutality, I would argue that even a more important fact than that is the response of the Iranian people. The fact that they are pouring out onto the streets by the tens of thousands to insist that their democratic rights be respected shows you how different Iran is from its neighboring countries. You could never imagine a demonstration like this after an election gets stolen in Egypt, for example. They expect it to get stolen. Nobody protests. That's just the culture there. In Iran, they demand that the votes be counted honestly. They know what democracy is. They're willing to sacrifice for it. So the democratic culture is very strong there. I actually believe that we could see a circumstance in which Turkey, which is now certainly the most democratic country in the Muslim Middle East, could even be overtaken by Iran. Iran could actually become even more democratic because it doesn't have some of the weights that Turkey has with military dominance. So these are two countries that share the social values of our country. I should add that Iran is the one country, the only country in the entire Middle East where, according to every public opinion survey, most people are pro-American. This pro-American sentiment in Iran is a huge strategic asset for us. We should take advantage of it and be sure not to do anything that would liquidate it, like trying to attack Iran. There's only one thing that will bring the Iranian nation behind President Ahmadinejad, who's very unpopular, and that would be attacking him from the outside. It happens in every country. When your country is under attack, you all unite and support your president, your leader, even if you don't like him. We saw that after 9/11 here in the United States, and that same thing will happen in Iran as well. So the Iranian fixation with the United States is intense. The internet culture is huge. I had a friend who traveled recently to Iran with Sean Penn, the actor. And he told me this story that they were walking around the bazaar in Isfahan, going from one stall to another. And he said they were at one stall where an old guy and his little grandson were working. And they looked at a couple of things, and they started to walk away. And the kid, who spoke English, called after them and said, "Excuse me, could you come back here, please?" So they went back, and the kid said, "My grandfather says he has a question he wants to ask you." So they said, "Okay." So the kid starts talking to his grandfather in Persian, and finally the kid then turns to Sean Penn and my friend, and he says, "My grandfather wants to know, What was it like being married to Madonna? I didn't even know Sean Penn was married to Madonna. So the America fixation in Iran is very, very strong. So that will show you that these countries share values in their societies. You don't want to have alliances that are just between governments. Those kinds of alliances are actually corrosive, because what happens is people in a country resent an unpopular or dictatorial government. And when the United States becomes allied with that government, people begin to resent the United States. That hurts us in the long run. So that's why Turkey and Iran make good partners for us in the sense of their social values. Now, the other piece of this was strategic interests over the long run. I think it's probably pretty clear that Turkey, as a military ally of the United States for 50 years, is clearly on board with what the United States wants to achieve in broader terms in the world. Turkey is actually going through a very interesting transition now. Turkey's taking a very active foreign policy. Turkey, because of its Ottoman heritage and because of the success of Turkish society, is in a unique position in the Islamic world. It is able to be a counterexample to reactionary Islam. If you want to see what's the opposite of the bin Laden idea of Islam, go to Turkey. Turkey is what the world needs. Turkey is the example of what a Muslim country can become if it adopts democratic principles. And that is hugely important for the United States. Turkey also has the advantage that it is now ruled by a political party that has its roots in political Islam, although it's much more moderate than Islamists would be in other countries. This hugely increases Turkey's credibility throughout the Islamic world. When the Turkish foreign minister lands in, say, Pakistan, every faction wants to talk to him, all the way from the far pro-American to the far anti-American. Same thing happens when the foreign minister shows up in, say, Lebanon. All the factions want to talk to him, the government, Hezbollah, all the different militant groups. Turkey is talking to Israel, but it's also talking to Hamas. It's talking to Russia and Georgia and trying to mediate between them. It's even trying to mediate between Iran and the United States. So Turkey is taking on a very interesting role. Turkey can go places and talk to people and strike deals that the United States can't. That makes Turkey very, very important for us. We really need an example to show the world what a country can become if it embraces modernity as well as Islam. And Turkey is the great answer to two great fallacies that have been spread around the world. One is Islam is not compatible with democracy, and the other is Islam is not compatible with capitalism. If you want to find out if those two things are true, just go to Turkey and you see how wrong they are. And Turkey is a great example for that. So I think it's a pretty easy sell that Turkey and the United States have long-term strategic interests in common. Iran might be a little harder sell because of the current regime that's in power there. I think it's likely that a partnership between the United States and Iran cannot be made during this present regime, although this regime may evolve in some very interesting ways in the relatively short-term future. But beyond the question of who's in power in Iran, let's look at what Iran's long-term strategic interests are. That doesn't change with governments. Okay, number one, they want a stable Iraq. They are right on the border with Iraq, and they have a huge ability to influence Iraq. These are the only two majority Shiite countries in the world. Iran is the Shiite homeland. Iraq is a majority Shiite country. Most of the Iraqi leaders were living in Iran for years and even decades in order to escape the Saddam dictatorship. Iran has a tremendous ability to help stabilize Iraq. Number two, Iran has huge ability to stabilize Afghanistan. A large part of Afghanistan used to be in Iran. They speak the same language.